All right. Hello. I don't know who, if anyone's waiting to jump on. I feel like obviously our post game shows are going to be a little more populated than the Bowling Green preview show, but we'll give people a little bit of time to come on if they want to come on. If not, this is the beauty of it going right up on YouTube after, is that people can watch. I'm going to tweet this from BSD Twitter, just so people know that we are live. Tim, what'd you have for dinner today? Tell the people.
For dinner, let's see. Made some turkey burgers in my Cuisinart, little quinoa. Roasted some veggies in the oven.
Health guy.
Yeah, I'm training for a marathon, so I try to keep it healthy.
Certainly makes sense. All right, we can. I just tweeted out. Give people another minute or two.
You tweeted out what I had for dinner.
Right now we got one person on. We are ranked. By the way, subscribers up to, last time I checked, was 54. So make sure that you are 56. Okay, look at that. 56 subscribers. So make sure you're subscribing. Once we hit 100, I'm taking my shirt off and doing a show shirtless, which I've already done before, at least on Mark's channel last year. So no surprise that I will be shirtless on another show this year.
It'll be for a celebratory reason.
Yes. Yeah. Last one was very sad reasons. All right. We can get started. So, in case you missed it, everyone out there, Penn State is 1-0. They beat West Virginia. And I don't know about everybody else, but looking around, after that game on Saturday and Sunday, it was one of those satisfying type games that you just you take in all the content that you can, whether it's, tweets, whether it's podcasts, whether it's other YouTube shows, whether it's, articles around the interwebs, whatever it is. I was kind of trying just to find as much Penn State as I can find because I was interested to see what people were thinking of Penn State. And I feel like for the most part, a lot of people going into that game, I don't want to say it was 50-50 Penn State, West Virginia, but it certainly seemed like West Virginia was that trendy pick to upset Penn State. So when that didn't happen, I was kind of curious to see what people would say. And I think by and large, Tim, it seems like people are pretty high on Penn State. I know before we went live, I was telling you how Bud Elliott has Penn State as his number 5 team in his playoff bracket, which would be, pretty sweet. Penn State would be hosting UNLV in Beaver Stadium in the first round, and then would have to go to the Cotton Bowl to play the Big 12 champion Utah Utes, which I don't know about you, Tim, but that sounds like a pretty good deal for Penn State if they can finally break into the playoff, and then not only the playoff, get to a potential semifinal by only having to beat UNLV at home in Utah. So now that the dust has settled a little bit, we're now 3 or 4 days away from Penn State's, I won't say big win over West Virginia, but dominant win over West Virginia. What are the vibes like as far as on your end? Are you even higher on this team? I know we talked a little bit about this on Saturday after the game. Are you even higher on this team, or are you kind of still trying to stay even keeled, knowing that, Penn State beat this same West Virginia team last year pretty handily as well?
Well, you forgot about Pat McAfee saying that Penn State's going to challenge for a natty after that win. Nice little 180 there from Pat. So
he kind of needed to save face, because if he still wants to be pro West Virginia, I can't talk too badly about Penn State.
Right. But no, I mean, seriously though, I'm a little, I'm not suddenly thinking they're going to win the natty, but I'd say I'm a little bit more optimistic maybe than I was going into it, especially after seeing how the offense performed. I obviously this is only just a glimpse of what we're gonna see as the season goes on from Andy Koldnicki's offense, but I didn't think it would look this prolific this quickly. And maybe it took a quarter for it to get going. Although I guess you could argue perhaps Koldnicki was just simply trying to feel out West Virginia's defense. And once he got a feel for what they like to do and where their strengths and weaknesses were, then second quarter it just seemed they flipped on a switch, and they never turned it off until after the damage had already been done. You saw, like I said, you saw Drew Aller just play with a level of confidence and that we really hadn't seen him play with last season. And like I said, I think on the postgame show, he slimmed down some. He's lost some of that baby fat. He's smooth. Seems like a bit quicker as a runner. I mean, no one's going to mistake him for Michael Vick, but he's, the guy can take off and run and pick up first downs with his legs. And he did that a few times to keep drives alive. And so now teams are going to have to account for that going forward. And guess what? When they respect your quarterback's ability to run, that opens up things for your running backs, for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Opens up things for everyone else on the field. I mean, when they have to respect your quarterback's running ability. So that's something we didn't really have last year, I felt. You didn't see Drew start to run until, maybe the last few games of the year. So I think that was a really nice development. Of course, the stiff arm. I mean, that's kind of becoming a bit of a iconic stiff arm at this point. Yeah. If Penn State goes on to have like a special, Big Ten championship type season or get in the playoff, I'm sure that's going to be one of those iconic photos.
It is a shame that he did get tackled. I mean, he got the first down, which was like kind of like the bigger part of that play, but Trotter does end up getting, gets him by the feet and takes him down, which, it would, I don't want to say it would have been cooler because I mean, just the video by itself and him, Drew getting up and like chirping back at him was great, but certainly wish if he really could have just, broken the tackle completely. But no, you're right. And I think the thing with Drew's mobility and, that's been one of the, I know I've talked about it on BSD and I know people have talked about it elsewhere, that running ability, you don't need Lamar Jackson. You don't need, Michael Vick 2000 at quarterback, but it's really, really hard to win with, a statue back there. Like even when you go back and look at like the Clemson teams with Trevor Lawrence and, nobody's going to mistake Trevor Lawrence for Lamar Jackson or Cam Newton or, whoever, Eric Crouch back in the day. But as we saw in that Ohio State game, in the semifinals, when Lawrence was I believe he was a sophomore, took off and scored like a rushing touchdown from like 60, 70 yards out, I want to say. So just somebody to keep the defense honest, and that's what Drew certainly did on Saturday, just with picking up third downs and keeping drives alive and just putting it on game film that if you drop 8 back into coverage, you drop 7 back into coverage, you don't have a spy on him, that he can take advantage of that. So no, I think, vibes are high all around Penn State. And, we were talking about the media before, whether it was, Bud Elliott, like I was saying, having Penn State number 5, or how you mentioned, Pat McAfee had to eat some crow. Another place where things are high is on the recruiting trail for Penn State, as they picked up 2 commits this week. They picked up wide receiver Matthew Outen from Virginia. He was originally committed to Virginia Tech. So, obviously, you like to think that it wasn't just Saturday that convinced him to switch, but watching Virginia Tech lose to Vanderbilt and then seeing Penn State, demolish West Virginia might have played a part in Allen flipping his commitment to Penn State. We'll talk about Allen.
Brent Pry.
Yeah, sorry, Brent Pry. We'll talk more about Allen later on, but good-looking wide receiver, consensus 4-star kid. I know 24/7 themselves, not the composite, but just 24/7 themselves has them as the 139th best player in the country. So a nice get there. And then on the offensive line, they also got Malachi Goodman from Paramus Catholic, one of the North Jersey powers, 6'5", 315-pound kid. Might be a guard, might be a tackle. I think Penn State, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, ideally, you like these guys to be tackles if they can play tackle. But another, top 150 kid, composite-wise, he's 146. For just 24/7 on their own rankings, they have him 125, and he chose Penn State over USC and Auburn, and had offers from a bunch of different people. So that was one that was, I don't want to say a long time coming, because I wouldn't say that Penn State ever felt like, probably great about landing him, but good to get him through, the finish line. So things are trending up for Penn State, Tim.
Got the number 13 class in the country, according to 24/7, as of right now.
Yeah, so getting up there. I'm sure that they're still going to be pretty lively on the flip trail with some other schools as well. So we'll keep everyone posted as we learn more about recruiting happenings on the trail for Penn State. But what I wanted to say was that vibes are high for Penn State, and I think another reason for that the media in general after that West Virginia game has kind of, I don't want to say flipped a switch on Penn State, but certainly is viewing them more favorably, is also how a lot of the other Big Ten teams looked. So coming into the season, I mean, I picked Oregon as my national champion, and if you saw Oregon on Saturday, they did not look that great. They were, I believe it was the line ended at 49.5. They were 49.5 point favorites against Idaho, a good FCS team for the record. I believe Idaho made either like the quarterfinals or semifinals last year for the FCS playoffs. So a good FCS team, but Oregon, I don't want to say they went down to the wire with Idaho, but they only won 24-14, and it was a 17-14 score in the fourth quarter. So certainly much closer than they were hoping for. Michigan, as well, was also in a one-score game with Fresno State at home in the Big House in a primetime kick on NBC. And then we also had USC on the other side of things. They come out against LSU, and they, look pretty impressive, all things considered, especially defensively. Danton Lynn was fantastic for that USC defense. So, Tim, which one of those schools? I guess let's stick with Oregon and USC first. That's really weird that Oregon and Michigan. It's just weird that Oregon and USC are Big Ten teams for the record. But let's stick with Oregon and Michigan first. What are kind of your takeaways from those two teams, and how do their performances kind of affect Penn State here moving forward? Do you feel better about Penn State's chances when you look at not necessarily playing Oregon and or not necessarily playing Oregon and Michigan, because they won't play them unless they get to the Big Ten championship, but as far as contenders for the Big Ten title? Because I personally, despite the fact what Oregon looked like against Idaho, I still think that I would rank them ahead of Penn State. But Michigan, I don't know, that looked a little weird in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I should say it is one game, although certainly I'm sure I haven't looked at the Oregon social media or message boards or whatever, but I would imagine they were certainly ringing some alarm bells over that performance. I think they jumped out to a 14-0 lead early on, and then just got stuck in neutral for a while until it was suddenly down to a 3-point game, and then they got their act together and put it away late. But I think I would imagine there's some things to work on. My understanding is their blocking wasn't very good from what I've read. And so we'll see if that's something that'll improve over the season, or if that's just a lingering problem that's going to bite them in the behind when they get into the heart of Big Ten play. But I don't think it takes off.
Sorry, Tim. I just want to say I do know they were dealing with some injuries on the offensive line as well. So also something to keep in track. But yeah.
So if those guys come back soon enough, then maybe they'll be okay and still be on the path towards perhaps playing for a Big Ten title. But I don't think it takes any shine. Doesn't take any shine off that Ohio State-Oregon game in mid-October as of right now. So we'll see. I mean, I don't think that changed anything. Now, Michigan, on the other hand, defense, it's still pretty damn good. That offense, though, not good, Bob. I think, what was it? First of all, their starting quarterback ended up not being who people thought it would be. It was this guy, Davis Warren. Everyone thought it was going to be Alex Orji, who's maybe not as good of a thrower, but is is an adept runner. I guess Warren, though, is a better passer. But the offense didn't even do a whole lot. I know their first touchdown came because of an interception on Fresno State's opening drive that set up in very short field and an easy touchdown. But after that, they didn't do a whole heck of a lot offensively. I'm just kind of pulling up the box score here to remind. I mean,
no, Davis Warren was not very good for Michigan. 15 and 25 for 118 yards. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So not exactly what the doctor ordered, especially coming off not that JJ McCarthy was exactly lighting teams up. Again, Michigan's bread and butter for the end of that Harbaugh era was all about dominating the line of scrimmage and running the football, and that was something that Michigan couldn't necessarily quite do. Donovan Edwards ran the ball 11 times. They had Khalil Mullings run the ball 50 times. Mullings had a little bit more success, 6.1 yards per carry, but Donovan Edwards, all the hype that he
Donovan
got
Edwards. It's pretty shocking to see him struggle like that out of the gate. And then the receiving core. I mean, Colston. It's really a tight end, Colston Loveland, who is carrying the crew. 8 catches, 87 yards, at touchdowns. I mean. And I figured, going into the season, I knew they lost like Roman Wilson and those Cornelius Johnson and those guys from last season, and we didn't know who they were going to replace with. But Colston Loveland was back, so not surprising they're leading on him in the passing game right now. But yeah, that offense has some work to do, and they better fix it up quickly. They got Texas coming to town this weekend. I know we're gonna maybe talk about that a little bit more later in the show. They better fix that quick if they want to upset the Horns this Saturday.
Yeah, I don't know what, and granted, Michigan had a lot of things happening, right? From preparing for the national title to Harbaugh leaving to Moore taking over, that perhaps they didn't just have enough time in the offseason to figure out what they want to do at quarterback. But I think if they were given, a mulligan, and if they could go back in time and say, hey, can they throw their hat in the, Will Howard or the Cam Ward or, whoever it may be, Grayson McCall into that ring, that I think they might have, because, Davis Warren, I know he has a great story. I believe he had some sort of cancer when he was in high school, and for him to overcome that and go to Michigan and stick around all these years and get the job, it's awesome. It's what makes college football awesome. But don't know that he's the type of quarterback that, for a team that is coming off a national championship and still has high expectations, if he's the guy you want. And yeah, like you're saying, I mean, receiving wise, they have, Loveland at tight end, but that's another area that it was kind of similar coming to Penn State this year, where don't really love it, right? So yeah, I think the more concerning of the two is definitely concerning as far as their fan bases go. For Penn State, I guess, fortunately, but yeah, Oregon's one of those. I didn't watch the first half. I only watched the second half, as I saw that as a close game and turn on the fourth quarter. But it's one of those that you look at the depth chart and it just doesn't really make sense. Dylan Gabriel was 41 of 49 and threw for 380 yards. Didn't have an interception. They did struggle running the ball a little bit, but even Jordan James was averaging 6.3 yards per carry. So just a weird game. So those things will happen, but certainly if you're a 49.5 point favorite, you're hoping for a little bit better there if you're Oregon. Jumping over to USC. So on the other side of things, as far as maybe looking better than we thought, they go out, they pick up a big win over LSU. LSU, poor Brian Kelly, just, hammering his fist after the game, just doesn't understand why they keep losing these first games, which, you play Florida State, you play USC, in 3 years, you're probably going to lose a couple, maybe not all three, but certainly going to lose a couple. So if you're LSU, you got to get like Arkansas State or something on the schedule to open up next season, or one of these coming seasons, just so you can start off 1-0. But I don't know. USC, I was pretty impressed with, and as we talked about before the West Virginia game, like games that concerned me as far as being a Penn State fan. I mentioned the West Virginia game, the USC game, and the Wisconsin game. The USC game was kind of the one that stuck out of those three, and nothing that happened Sunday night, makes me feel good as far as a Penn State fan goes. Now, granted, Penn State needs USC to be good, right? Penn State can't just not play anybody and then play Ohio State and just hope that works out. So certainly, if you're a Penn State fan, you want to be rooting for, all the teams that are on their schedule coming up. But Dan Lynn worked his magic. I thought Miller and Moss looked really good, and I do see this comp that we had that USC should have lost Probably, right? Dan Lin was taking a page right out of Tom Bradley's playbook, the bend but don't break, gave up a ton of yards, and LSU just couldn't convert in the red zone. But Tim, what were your thoughts on USC?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they should have lost, Peter, but I mean, that was a game that felt like it could go either way. But I'll say defense looked improved, at least compared to, past years. And USC looked like a team that's, I thought it was going to be maybe their toughest game outside of Ohio State when we're going over our schedule preview. And, this game only further solidified that. But, defense, we'll see. I mean, they held LSU to 20 points. Although they did give up 300 yards still to LSU's quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier, just 30 of 39, 2 touchdowns, and interception. On the ground, against the run, they were all right, not bad. Only gave up 113 yards on 25 carries total. I guess that might include some quarterback screen. Well, no, it doesn't. But it's just. But we'll have to see how this defense continues to perform. Just like with Penn State's offense, it was one game. You like what you see. Let's see how they continue to improve over the course of the next month. But that will be. I anticipate that's going to be probably similar to what you watched on Sunday. I think it's a game where probably both teams get into the 20s at least, and you do see some fireworks offensively from both teams. So should be an interesting one. May not quite be like the fireworks we saw at the Rose Bowl, but I think it's still going to be a pretty competitive one that comes down to one that's decided within one score, just like this game was. I mean, it's, shout out, I guess kudos to the USC. They found a way to pull it out. And they didn't even bother. I don't know if you watched it live, but look like they were just trying to set up for the game-winning field goal. And then Woody Marks goes, nah, screw that. We're just going to finish this one in the end zone. And not even bother having a potential college kickers moment.
No, I think the thing with USC, right? So USC, whether they should have won or should have lost is, I guess, in some respect, like not the most important takeaway from the game. I think even if they come out of the game and say LSU, they're able to convert that. I don't remember what it was, but the third down that they had in the red zone, and they were able to keep the drive alive, and then they're kind of just able to put away from there, and LSU wins. I still think the main takeaway from that is that the USC defense isn't like greatly pathetic. Like, okay, maybe they're not even maybe they're not even a top half unit at the end of the season in the Big Ten, but they're not as bad as they were under Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley's first.
They're not woeful like they've typically been under Lincoln Riley's teams.
And not to make it like, like the cliches, but like, I don't know. They looked like that they were playing tough. It looks like they were bought in. They looked like they were well coached. They were wrapping up. They were, for the most part, tackling. Like, just things that if you watched USC, a couple of years ago against Utah, like you would have never would have thought was possible. So just that alone, I mean, classic USC having to hire a Penn State guy, defense, bring him in, coach him up. So Dan Lin doing great things at USC, but. No, I think that, and Miller Moss, I thought looked really good and really comfortable and really confident, which maybe we should have just we should have expected that, given that, Lincoln Riley is always going to have a good offense and is always going to have a pretty good quarterback. So
he did throw for 6 touchdowns in their bowl game too. So
he did. Bowl games are a little I'm
talking about for his own confidence. I mean, throwing 6 touchdowns in the bowl game certainly helped him in that regard.
Fair. So we'll see. USC on the up. Oregon maybe like slightly on the way down. Again, they have a lot of very easy games until that Ohio State game. So I'm not exactly expecting them to be tested too much. And then Michigan on the downswing. And we'll talk a little bit more later about that Texas matchup that's coming up this Saturday at noon, because I feel pretty strongly one way or the other, and it certainly is going to be in favor of of the Wolverines. But before we get to all that, let's talk a little bit about Bowling Green. So I kind of actually want to start in reverse here, Tim. And I don't believe that you put in your score prediction yet for the Bowling Green game. But what is your score prediction? Just because I don't think either of us have Penn State losing, and I imagine that both of us have Penn State winning comfortably. So I have 45-10. So I don't think it'll be particularly close. So let's kind of start.
That was my prediction too.
Really?
In my head.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, I don't want to steal
minds.
people's thunder, but Ryan put 41-10, which I was like, ooh, that sounds pretty good. So I kind of did something along those lines.
I mean, that's what I'm picturing, 45-10 type score. Maybe I was looking further at the forecast. I know they're calling for rain Saturday in State College, but it sounds like that may not be coming until around 3 o'clock, or at least like late afternoon. So maybe not until towards the end of the game or after the game, hopefully. Because if it does rain during the game, then obviously that maybe that score prediction might need to be revised down a little bit.
Right now, it's looking like it's going to be before the game. So they have it. It's only highest chance is 35%. Well, 35% for the coverage area.
It may not be like raining the whole time. It may just be like spurts or something. So knows? I mean, it feels like a game that Penn State should cover. I mean, they were 32-point favorite when I saw it last time. 32.5.
Something like that.
So,
yeah.
I mean, 45-10 is like covering that spread. So, it feels like that kind of a game. Like, I think, it's a game that should hopefully be out of reach by halftime. Worst case, it's out of reach by mid-third quarter. By the end of the third quarter, it's the second and third string guys are in. Drew Hours just yucking it up on the sidelines with the other starters. And, you want to see the backups getting a lot of run. That's what you want to see in a game like this. And of course, to get out of it without any injuries, any key guys getting hurt. Bowling Green, I guess talk about them just a little bit. Last week they beat up on Fordham in their season opener, 41-17, and the running back Terry Stewart went off 14 carries, 161 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
He's a dude. Like he's
like 5'9", 220. He's a short. He's stocky and fast.
Remember Doug Martin at Boise State? They call him like muscle hamster. That's literally who he reminds me of. 5'9", 220 pounds. This guy's balance and just like his ability to take hits and just like bounce off of them and keep his contact and keep his feet moving and not fall over. Like it's pretty freaky. And I'm almost like kind of surprised that, and it's sad that college football is kind of at this state, but I'm almost kind of surprised that he's still at Bowling Green, just because I feel like last season he had 125 carries for 762 yards. So 6.1 yards per carry, had 8 touchdowns. Not much of a receiving threat, at least last year only had 1 catch, but I'm always surprised that that he didn't make the move to whatever we're calling it now, Power 4, I guess. Just because I could totally see him at in Indiana or at even like a Missouri or a place like that. So
maybe next year he'll find himself in Power 4.
Didn't want to cut you off, but he is definitely a dude.
He's built like Peter says, built like a bowling ball and about as easy to tackle. So, I can picture him ripping off a few decent runs, or at least one of those runs where you think he's down, then he just drags the pile of a few more yards. So, yeah, I'm sure he'll pull off a few big plays. And then their tight end Harold Fannin Jr., 6'4", 230-pound guy, and again another guy. Maybe you're a little surprised he hasn't transferred up to a Power 4 program, but I don't know what his eligibility is like. But maybe
he's a
that
junior.
Could also be the. So maybe, who knows if he does well this year in the MAC, maybe he can, find himself. Unless the NFL, I'm sure NFL they scout the hell out of college football in general. So I mean, I'm sure, maybe they'll if he's already grading out as a draft pick, maybe just go straight to the NFL after this year. But he's kind of got the NFL type body, and so I could see him making some kind of like what Cole Taylor did last week for West Virginia. I could see him come up with a few catches to move the chains for Bowling Green. And speaking of just run the ball to them, Connor Bazelak, if the name sounds familiar, he was quarterback in Missouri, and then was at Indiana before going to Bowling Green. So, he's the year that Penn State played Indiana when he was still there. Actually, he didn't end up playing because he was injured. But he had 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions that year before he transferred over to Bowling Green.
He's a fine MAC quarterback. I wouldn't say. I mean, definitely, like you said, has that the Power 4 pedigree with Missouri and Indiana, but
maybe not quite Power 4 count, but he's definitely a solid MAC quarterback. So, they'll probably. I could see him putting together maybe like one scoring drive early on. Don't know if that ends up being a field goal or a touchdown, but I could see him putting together one scoring drive when the outcome's still in doubt. But still, I would expect Tom Allen, that defense, to adjust quickly enough and eventually just hold him in check. Because at the end of the day, still, Penn State's athletes on defense are just a whole other breed from what they faced last week in Fordham. I mean, just like how West Virginia found out, now they're the top rushing offense in the country last year, and were amongst Power 4, something like that. But they got held to under 100 yards total rushing last week because Penn State's just so athletic on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that athleticism will hold Bowling Green in check.
I can see this game. I could see this game going kind of how we saw Ohio in 2020. I think it was 2022. Yeah, it was the game
2 years ago.
I think it was before Auburn. And Ohio was, under Frank Solich for those years, and their new head coach now is always a solid program. And Bowling Green, I think that they'll be, one of the favorites in the MAC. What exactly that means as far as their football acumen, I don't know, but they're certainly a solid MAC team that, they made a bowl game last year and could make a bowl game this year. So certainly like a good test for Penn State. And as we're saying, like Terrion Stewart's a hell of a player, and their tight end Harold Fannin is also a really good tight end guy that, as we're saying, could definitely make the move to, the Big Ten next year. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to Penn State's, speed and athleticism, both offensively and defensively. It's just something that is going to, take its mark as the game goes on. So, like I was saying, kind of similar to how Ohio was in 2022. Certainly not Ohio in 2012. Don't want to talk about that. But Ohio in 2022, where they keep it close, they keep it respectful for a little bit before Penn State's athletes and just general size overtakes them. Defensively, Bowling Green, again, pretty good team. I like their defensive tackle, Anthony Hawkins. He's a guy that once again could kind of see him being at a powerful school if he had wanted to be. He had a big game against Fordham last week, 2 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. He's an experienced starter there in the middle of their defense. And they had 2 really good corners last year. One of them ended up transferring to Maryland, Jalen Husky, but another one stayed. Jordan, I believe you pronounce his last name, Oladokun. He was
Oladokun.
Oladokun.
That's how I say it.
We'll go with Oladokun. All-MAC performer, another guy that, I think could eventually get some NFL looks and certainly should be a good test for Trey Wallace on Saturday. But yeah, again, can't really see this game being too crazy for Penn State, even if, the weather is a little questionable.
So yeah, I think this is a game where you hope Penn State can put this away by halftime and just get a bunch of reps for the 2s and 3s. No one gets hurt. Everybody goes home happy. Bowling Green gets a nice fat paycheck out of it. So, and hopefully the weather's not too terrible.
I was going to say, looking at the weather, like every other day, like Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like every other day in the next 10 days in State College is all just pure sun. And then Saturday, 55 and rainy. So 55% chance of rain, rather. So hopefully Penn State gets some luck there, and either the rain holds off until after the game or it comes before the game. But yeah, it looks like we'll have at least some sort of overcast as the game goes on, which I guess is okay. If you're going to have these rainouts like it was last year for UMass, which hopefully it's not that bad, but rather it be for the UMasses and the Bowling Greens of the world than some of the other more important games. But so we're both going with 45-10. Is that the consensus?
Yeah, I think we're both going with 45-10.
All right, that certainly works for me. All right, so we both have Penn State winning. Penn State beautifully gets a bye week after this, which is pretty nice. Get an early season bye as they, hopefully don't have too many bumps and bruises, but you never know. But let's move on from Penn State and let's talk a little bit about some of the other national games that will be going on. Unfortunately, Penn State's game is at noon, while the Texas and Michigan game is also at noon. Tim, thoughts on Texas and Michigan? It's in the Big House in Ann Arbor, big noon kickoff. Who do you have winning that game?
Well, luckily I have YouTube TV, and so hopefully the quad box, there'll be an option with Penn State's game and Michigan, Texas. But I mean, I'm definitely going to have to go with the Horns in this one. I think it's a game where Michigan's defense will keep it close for a while. But that offense, I mean, that offense is just they've got issues. Davis, just not very adept at throwing the ball, and their run games they seem to it's been okay, but nothing to write home about. You would think they would be a little better running the ball on a team like Fresno State. I know they're a very good G5 team, but still, you think they would have done a little bit better of a job running on them. So I don't know. So I think it's one of those games that keep it close for a while, but their offense is just not able to keep up. They're not able to, move the chains frequently enough, and then eventually the D gets tired, and then Texas just starts to assert their will and start finishing drives in the end zone, and they just start pulling away by the fourth quarter. So I would take the Horns to 7.5 point favorite. I would definitely take the Horns to cover that one. That feels like maybe a 10 to 17 point win for Texas.
Yeah, the 7.5 point line almost makes me nervous that it's that low. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but my guess is that's probably one of those lines that like 88% of the money is coming in on Texas, just because I don't know. I mean, Michigan still has really good defense. Will Johnson at corner and Mason Graham at D tackle, and still just dudes all over the place on defense. Some good linebackers too. I don't know, like just based off of like just general like vibes and kind of just like what happens in college football and everything that Michigan had lost, and just the turnover there with the players and the coaching staff, and it just feels like this is kind of going to be almost, I don't say a coming out party for Texas, considering that they made the college football playoff last year and clearly are a very good team. But I don't know. Everything to me is pointing that this should be a big Texas win. So the line of only 7.5 is a little funny to me, just because I thought it would have been in the 10 to 11 area. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just not looking at the right way. But yeah, I would be pretty surprised if Michigan is able to win in all honesty. So other games, maybe the game that I'm looking forward to the most, we're going to jump all the way to prime time. And I know, Tim, you're a little bit older than me, but certainly a college football fan in the 90s. And I personally it gets better than Nebraska-Colorado, but Nebraska-Colorado is classic. And just all the hype coming into the season with, obviously Deion Sanders at Colorado and Shedeur Sanders, and Matt Rule at Nebraska with Dylan Raiola, and these two programs that, I think it's safe to say that both are on the upswing, even if Colorado's might be, a little bit shorter than we all think, because you never know what's going to happen with Deion Sanders once Shedeur leaves. But this game in Nebraska, I think tensions are going to be, pretty high after last year. And just generally, I mean, I don't think Colorado has played a non-tension filled game. It's just kind of what they do. But Nebraska also favored in this one by 7.5. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, having watched both, or at least having kind of glimpses of both games they played last week, I don't know, the 7.5, and just thinking about how last year Colorado just demolished Nebraska in Boulder. I mean, I think the 7.5 line is a little bit high. Now, if
I
you put
agree.
that at 4.5, 5.5, I'd have to do some serious thinking on which way to go with that. I think Nebraska gets the win, but I think it's Colorado's going to keep that one close. I mean, or it's going to be, or it could be a back and forth kind of game where the teams just trade leads. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a tight one, really, because I think early enough in the season where Colorado's not worn down yet with Shador getting hit all the time due to his lack of an offensive line, and he's still got healthy Travis Hunter. You got Jimmy Horn catching the ball.
DeJounte Lester, some Penn State wants it very badly at wide receiver. Will Shepard, Vandy guy. They have, I mean, great offense. Certainly skilled.
They got some guys on off. I mean, I think that alone can. I mean, I just don't know what to make of Nebraska's defense yet. I mean, they played UTEP, so it's hard for me to truly gauge. I think, I think it's going to be an exciting game, which is going to be a good back and forth one. Unfortunately, I got to get up super early Sunday morning, so I'm going to have to go to bed earlier, and I won't be able to watch the whole thing. But I'll definitely probably be catching the highlights on YouTube of the next day. But I anticipate this being a tight one. I think it should be a good quarterback battle between Shador Sanders and Dylan Raiola. A lot of they can. You're probably young, but maybe you've seen them on YouTube. Like those old McDonald's commercials with Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, where they play horse. They keep having to get nothing but net. Yes. So they start doing ridiculous. Yeah, so it could end up being like that, where it just turns into a game of like, can you top this between those two quarterbacks? Like it might. This one has some. This might have some fun. Might be a fun shootout. Actually, now that I think about it,
it's I don't know. I do think that the line is a little high. I agree on that. Like I kind of like what you were saying. I would have guessed like 3.5, 4.5 for Nebraska. I also have a terrible read on Colorado. I don't think I've ever won a bet, whether it's betting for or against Colorado. Like bet against them against TCU, lost that pathetically. I bet against them against Nebraska last year, lost that. Bet for them against Colorado State, they lose. And then bet for them against North Dakota State, and they don't cover that either. So maybe I just can't get a read on Colorado, and I don't know what to exactly expect of them. But my gut instinct coming into this is that 7.5 seems a little high, even though I think Nebraska should be the favorite. That just seems, giving them a touchdown plus seems a little on the high side. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, Dylan Raiola looked really good against UTEP, but UTEP is UTEP. Not that Colorado exactly is, setting the world on fire defensively either. So yeah, you might be right. We'll see. We'll see what happens as far as the score goes. And Nebraska has a great defense coordinator in Tony White, so we'll see if he can have some things cooked up for Shador. But I don't know. That's just one of those games that I think just the jerseys and the colors and just the overall vibe of the teams going back to the late 90s, early 2000s, where when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was a good games. That was a good Black Friday rivalry game they used to play. And I don't know if you watch. You should go back sometime and check out the 2001 edition of that game. Nebraska was number 1 in the country. Yeah,
is that the game Colorado scored 63?
Yeah, so 62, 30.
And
Colorado's
was running back.
Chris Brown, this other guy named Bobby Purify. They just ran they brought them 400 something yards on the ground against Nebraska. Just ran all over them.
That is literally one of my earliest memories. I say 2000, 2001 is when I start to.
It's 2001. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I do remember that game. Even I feel like it's one of those things of you see so many highlights that then it's oh yeah, I remember that live. So even if I don't remember live, certainly I'm familiar with it. Other than that, I mean, it is kind of like a weaker slate this coming week. The ABC
You have
primetime game
Tennessee
is
and NC State in prime time as well. Which
Tennessee, NC State. Unfortunately, it's a neutral site game in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I don't know. Neutral site games kind of stink. Like don't really know what to think of that. But
I like Tennessee to cover in that one. Their
so do
offense looks pretty prolific.
I generally root for NC State. They're just like one of like the, how you just like certain teams for the reason. NC State's always been a team that I just like generally like root for, but I agree. Tennessee seems like a wagon. Certainly with Nico, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. I know I was listening to Solid Verbal. They've been practicing it this entire summer, and they're still just trying to figure it out.
Leva, something like that.
Something along those lines. But no, he looks like a beast, and this will be a good test because they weren't. I believe they played Chattanooga right last week. So
yeah, Chattanooga 69-3.
Not much of a contest. So NC State will certainly give them more of a test with that Tony Gibson defense. So yeah, both like Tennessee in that one. Boise State at Oregon will be interesting. I did say earlier that Oregon's not really tested until the Ohio State game. And while, I still think that mostly to be true because Oregon is a minus 19.5 point favorite against Boise State. And it's in Autzen.
Ashton Jonty. Yeah. Look out for that guy. He might give Oregon some problems.
Yeah. Certainly will. And that's I won't say the first Big Ten After Dark because we did have Washington, Weber State earlier or last week, but one of the more key matchups with Boise State coming in. So that might be one I have to toss on as I'm going to bed. But other than that, kind of
USC at 11 Eastern time on BTN as well. So you got a couple Big Ten After Darks.
Yeah, other games on Saturday: Michigan State, Maryland at 3:30, and whatever. South Carolina at Kentucky. You have Cal at Auburn. Baylor goes to Utah. There's El Assico, Iowa State. So not exactly the stacked card. That's why it's a shame that the Michigan Texas game is at noon during Penn State because you can have OTVs on, or like you said on UTV, you do the YouTube TV, you do the multi-view. But I don't know. When Penn State's on, I'm pretty locked in, especially for the first half. I'll be pretty locked into just Penn State. So
yeah. Well, you can. I mean, maybe in the beginning I'll have it just on Penn State, or maybe have the Michigan game on like an iPad or something. But eventually, if Penn State starts pulling away, I can just go to a quad box. That's usually the move of me in Penn State games these days.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have.
So you got your fantasy football draft coming up shortly.
Yes, got a fantasy football draft come up in 10 minutes. So I had a hard stop at 9:00, so we can get on out of here. So we both have Penn State going 1-0, beating Bowling Green. So, Tim, thanks for joining. And we will once again be live after the game on Saturday. Probably should be right around 3:00. Knock on wood, there's no thunderstorms this time. So we will see you guys at 3:30 on Saturday.